It's no secret that a lot of people are afraid of clowns, or at least weirded out by them. Though clowns are meant to be happy and joyous, people can find their makeup and costumes to be downright weird. Here are 3 stories of clowns that genuinely freaked people out, and worse. Story 1. I think this happened around the time of all those clown sightings, though I'm not sure. This happened a few years ago, one Halloween. I was a sophomore in high school, and my younger siblings and their friends were out trick-or-treating. It was a Friday, so our parents were fine with them staying out a bit later. Because I didn't feel like going trick-or-treating and didn't have any parties to go to, I got stuck handing out the candy. We live in an average neighborhood, and when it was busiest, our doorbell would ring every few minutes with another group of kids on our front porch. I'd normally be in my room listening to music or talking with my friends, but because I'd have to answer the door and hand out candy, I was listening with my headphones in on the couch in the living room. The doorbell was still loud enough so that I could hear it over the sound of my music. About halfway through the evening, I heard the doorbell go off, and so I got up to answer the door. But this time, instead of a group of like 10-year-olds, there was only one man. I say man because he looked to be in his 30s. He was wearing a clown costume with a clown mask, so I couldn't see his face, but I immediately knew something was off. He was standing very close to the door, so much so that when I opened it, I almost hit him. He was also standing completely still with his hands at his sides, and he was just looking at me. I almost jumped back a bit before I managed to say, "Hey." But to that the man said nothing, and just continued to stand there. Eventually I asked him, "Would you like some candy?" He still didn't say anything, and this time I noticed he wasn't even holding a bag or a bucket. Needless to say, it was very awkward and creepy at this point. Now my parents had taught me to be polite, so I didn't just want to shut the door in his face, but I honestly didn't know what else to do. A few seconds later, that's exactly what I did. But I didn't just go back to listening to music. Rather, I waited at the door and kept looking through the peephole. He was still just standing there. I still didn't know what to do. My parents were at a get-together with some of their friends, so I was actually home alone. I debated whether or not to call them, but I figured it wasn't worth it. At least, not yet. After what seemed like a minute, the man slowly turned away and started walking off our front porch. A few minutes later the doorbell rang again, and I was relieved to see a group of normal young kids. They told me, "Trick or treat," and I handed out candy. Then something occurred to me. I asked the adult that was with the kids whether or not she had seen the man in the clown costume. She said no, and then they left our porch. Out of curiosity, I decided to ask that question off and on throughout the rest of the evening, and no one else had seen him either. Finally, the trick-or-treating was starting to die down around 8 or so, and I started watching a movie on TV. I expected my younger brother and sister to come home relatively soon, and then our parents might get back closer to midnight. I almost didn't hear it with the TV on, but I thought I could make out a faint tapping sound. However, it wasn't at the front door, but rather at the back door. Immediately I thought that my little brother might be messing with me, but then I remembered that man in the creepy clown costume. I decided to wait for a minute or two to see if the tapping continued, and it did. At this point, it started to sink in that it could be that guy, and that he was actually in our backyard. My heart began to race, and I chose to confirm my suspicion by getting up and peeking through some of the blinds further away from the door. Sure enough, it was him. I'm still not sure if he saw me, but his head was moving back and forth, like he was constantly looking around. I immediately stepped back from the blinds, and thought about what to do next. I called my parents, who were very concerned, and told me to call the cops. They also told me to try to figure out where my siblings were and to keep them safe. I should mention that my brother and sister didn't have cell phones. My parents didn't want them to have them. So, since I didn't know the phone numbers of any of their friends, my only option was to call their parents. I figured it would be safest to call 911 first, so that's what I did. I explained that there seemed to be a disturbed man who had gotten through our fence and was now tapping at our back door. I also explained that my younger brother and sister were out trick-or-treating and could arrive home any minute. The operator advised me to arm myself and wait in a room with a locked door. I didn't want to do that though, since that would mean my siblings would be vulnerable. At this point, the tapping had turned into a light banging, and the man had started talking. It didn't sound like he was talking to someone else, rather, it was just a manic kind of mumbling. I started to cry, and I also didn't want to be in that house for another minute. Seconds later, I heard glass shattering and I screamed. I told the operator that I was going to run out of our front door and then into the street so that I could intercept my brother and sister and also be in a public area. The operator said that plan was okay, and so that's exactly what I did. I ran down our driveway and onto the sidewalk, where thankfully there was a group of kids with like 2 adults about a block away. I started waving my arms, and they saw me and came over. The kids were scared, but the adults tried to comfort me. A few minutes later, 2 cop cars showed up, and more bystanders had started to walk over. They entered our house with their guns drawn, and shortly thereafter they came out with a man in cuffs. They'd taken off his mask, and the man looked disgusting. He was indeed in his 30s, and he had a buzz cut and his eyes looked completely insane. He was still muttering to himself and looking around, but I don't think he was looking at me or anyone else though. 2 cops put him in one of the cars and drove off, while the other 2 waited with me until my siblings and parents arrived. Needless to say, my brother and sister were dumbfounded, and my parents were hysterical and just glad we were all safe. Apparently the man had just punched one of the glass windows in our back door with his hand, and he hadn't had any weapons. We found out that he was in fact mentally ill and had been off his medications. Ultimately, he was committed to a mental hospital. To this day, we're not sure why he targeted us or decided to break into our house, but I just hope that he is receiving the help that he needs. Story 2. This happened a long time ago when I was a kid, and way before the clown epidemic of 2016. When I was in elementary school, my mom used to take me to the local library about 15 minutes from where we lived. It also happened to be close to my school, so after a while my friends and I would sometimes hang out there as well. The library had a small forested area around it, but as we lived in the suburbs of a major city, this wasn't a rural setting by any means. The library also had a small park with tennis courts, and train tracks a little bit beyond that. My friends and I didn't really play tennis, but we did explore the tracks every now and then. On one particular day after school, me and my 2 friends, who I'll call Ben and David, were walking along the tracks. We were putting off going home and doing homework, and we also wanted to see how far we could go. We'd walked down them before, and David would usually put a penny on the tracks to see if a train would come by and flatten it. But whenever we walked down the next time, we never find them though. This time we kept walking for what was probably half a mile, when Ben stopped and asked David and I if we saw it. We asked him what it was, and he pointed down the tracks and slightly to the right and said he saw a clown. At first Ben and I thought he was just trying to scare us, but sure enough, when we looked, we saw it too. From this far away, it was hard to make out any features, but it seemed like whoever it was wearing a costume with bright colors including green, yellow, and red. They were also wearing one of those multicolored wigs, and were wearing white face paint with the makeup around the eyes and mouth. I'm not sure if that person was wearing the stereotypical clown shoes though, because I couldn't see their feet. I think at this point we were all a bit scared, but we didn't want to show it to each other. We started walking forward again a little bit more slowly. The clown was about 200 feet away, I'd say. However, when we were a bit closer, we saw the person start to run towards us. And I don't mean he was walking, he was full on sprinting. Obviously, being the little kids we were, we screamed and ran away. We ran all the way back to the library without stopping, and only then did we catch our breath. Ben, David, and I agreed not to mention what we saw, but eventually our desire for attention got the better of us, and either Ben or David spilled the beans. The clown became a kind of urban legend at our school, and a few weeks later some other kids claimed to have seen him. After that, another kid said the clown had shown up at the school after the buses left one day, and that there were actually 3 clowns. However, I don't think anyone believed that story. We ourselves didn't go back to the track, at least not for a while. Around a year later, David and I were at the library working on our book report when we decided to take a break and play in the park area for a bit. We joked about how the clown was still over there, but at some point our curiosity got the better of us again, and we egged each other on to start walking down the tracks. It was a little scary, but it was also exciting, and I could feel my heart start racing while we walked over to the tracks. We agreed that we'd walk to the spot where we had seen the clown standing before, and he started chasing us. After a few minutes we were almost there, and we could see it in our field of view. But then both of our hearts sank. There, almost exactly where he was before, we saw the clown. I'm not sure if it was the exact same outfit, but from what I remember, it looked very similar. David and I stopped dead in our tracks, both of us frozen out of fear. This time he didn't chase us, and we weren't even sure he spotted us. However, we eventually saw him look to his right and then back at us. David and I didn't know what to do. We honestly hadn't expected him to be there again. I mean, who would? For a moment I considered actually walking closer and asking what he was doing, but I was way too scared. I think David felt the same way. Instead, we slowly started backing up, keeping our eyes on the clown. He still didn't come towards us, and eventually he left our field of view. When we got back to the library, David and I used one of the computers to look up on Google Earth where we had seen the clown. We managed to find the library in the tracks, but there weren't any other buildings next to the tracks for miles. They ran through kind of a woodsy, forest preserve area. David had thought that maybe the clown was someone who lived really close to the tracks and enjoyed just messing with kids who walked down them for whatever reason, but that idea didn't seem to work. I thought that whoever it was could be a lunatic who had escaped from an asylum and was hiding out by the tracks. But that didn't explain why he would be right at the same spot almost a year later. Another theory we came up with was that he was from some kind of cult, and that they needed a lookout to scare away people passing by on foot. In the end, we had no way of knowing. Nothing else happened after that, though we never went back again. Ben, David, and I all went our separate ways and attended different colleges, and though I don't know what happened to Ben, I do still keep up with David. Neither of our families still live in the area, and we don't have a compelling reason to go back there. But maybe one day, out of sheer curiosity, David and I will walk back down the tracks. Some part of me feels like the clown will still be there, waiting for us. Story 3. This story happened to me when I was in the 5th grade. Our school was having an assembly with a kind of circus-like thing. There were a group of entertainers, including a juggler, a clown, a man on a unicycle, and a couple other people. I don't remember exactly what it was supposed to be. This was near the end of the school year, and I think there was supposed to be another segment with awards and speeches, but that was cut short. You're about to hear why. The entire 2nd through 5th grade classes were sitting in the bleachers in our main gymnasium. They were wooden bleachers which pulled out from against the walls and toward the basketball court area, and there wasn't a lot of room. There were probably around 150 of us, counting the various teachers and other staff. My friends and I were sitting towards the back, and of course we were goofing off. Soon after the entertainment began, the clown started moving closer to the bleachers. I think he was giving the little kids in the first row high fives, and then he started to walk up into the bleachers. I'll refer to him as he here, since that's what my friends and I thought that person's gender was. He was wearing some kind of mask, so we weren't exactly sure. After giving a few other kids high fives and making silly hand gestures, the clown came up to our group of friends. My friends and I fell silent, since we thought the clown had come over to us because we were talking. The clown actually held up a finger to his mouth in a very exaggerated way, and then pretended to be laughing. I should mention that the clown wasn't saying anything, perhaps to not distract from the rest of the entertainment. My friends and I started to chuckle, because it was awkward and we didn't know what to do. The clown just stayed in our area, now giving out high fives and giving us a thumbs up. Eventually it started to get uncomfortable, and we weren't sure if he wanted us to say or do something before he'd leave. Eventually my friend Tyler said, "Hey, we're good." The clown looked at him and made a gesture like wiping tears from his eyes. Then he made a laughing motion and turned around and walked back down the bleachers. After he left, we all started laughing, partly because it was a slightly tense situation. We started joking that he was actually trying to kidnap us. I had to go to the bathroom, and when the circus kept dragging on, I decided I didn't want to wait for the break. I went over and asked our teacher if I could please use the restroom, and she was okay with it. She just told me to head straight back. I walked down the far side of the bleachers, closest to the gym doors, and walked through them into the hallway. The entrance to the bathroom/locker rooms wasn't too far away, and as I opened the door to go inside, I immediately knew something was off. I think it was the faint sound in the background. Though I was a bit startled, I still had to pee, and I figured it was just another kid in there. I went over to the urinals, did my business, and went to the sinks to wash my hands. But right as I turned the corner to the sink area, my stomach sank as I saw the clown. I'm not sure why I didn't start screaming then and there. I guess I was just too paralyzed with fear. I also couldn't run back out the doors to the hall, since the clown was blocking the exit. The urinals, stalls, and sinks were in their own separate area, and I'd have to get past the clown to get to the rest of the locker room. At first the clown didn't do anything, but then he started motioning with his hand for me to come forward. I couldn't move. Then the clown said, "It's alright, I want to show you something." Hearing the clown's voice for the first time, I could tell it was a woman, but that didn't have any effect on the situation. The clown mumbled something which I couldn't make out, and slowly started walking towards me. I knew I had one shot and dove for the gap between the clown and the wall. To my horror, the clown threw her arms around me and held me back. I started screaming and kicking, and the clown actually tried to put her hand over my mouth. I kept trying to scream, and after one or two good kicks, she let go. I bolted out into the hallway and started running back to the gym. When I got there, there was loud music playing as the man on the unicycle was balancing on a long plank. Maybe that's why no one came when I started screaming. Regardless, one of the teachers saw me and was immediately concerned. She and two other teachers came out into the hallway while the music was still going. Just as I was explaining that the clown had been inside of the bathroom and grabbed me, the teachers and I saw the clown come out of the bathroom, limping. Immediately the teachers started yelling, and she stopped and turned towards them. I think she tried telling the teachers that she hurt her leg during the performance, and that's why she went to one of the bathrooms, but I don't think anyone bought it. The teachers and eventually our campus security came over to the clown as cops were apparently on their way. Meanwhile, the festivities were ended, and an announcement was made for everyone to go back to their classrooms with their teachers and stay there. I, of course, didn't go back with my friends, and when they saw me in the hallway, they were genuinely freaked out. I gave a statement to the cops, and soon after that, my parents arrived. My mom was just glad I was okay, while my dad, on the other hand, was furious. I remember him yelling at one of the teachers and someone from the entertainment company in the hallway, and them looking very apologetic. I'll spare a lot of the details, but it turned out that the clown had just joined the company. Apparently they had done a background check and found nothing, and she didn't have any kind of criminal record. Charges were pressed, though I can't remember exactly what the person got convicted of and what their punishment was. Needless to say, this event had a profound impact on me. And though luckily nothing near this scary has happened to me since, I've been a lot more cautious.